Okay, so for your vector painting, this is what we're gonna be painting. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. And what you need is you need those reference photos that I put on Moodle. And what you wanna do is, here's my sketchbook. You want to tape your reference photo into your sketchbook so that we can stay consistent with the direction that we're looking at this from, because the top is different from the bottom and it's different from the sides. So we want to make sure that we are not rotating our reference photo while we're painting. We also want to make sure that we're not rotating our canvas. So I'm going to make sure that my Saks logo is up, and I'm just going to flip it over. So if I were to look at it from the back, Saks is up, this is the top, this is the bottom, and then left and right accordingly. So I'm going to show you how to set up your canvas, and we're going to use this as our reference guide. And you will need a ruler for this. So here is my ruler and my canvas. The first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna draw lines. You're gonna draw a vertical line and a horizontal line through your canvas. You can measure this if you want it to be exactly halfway, or you can just eyeball it. You just need it to be somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect. So there's my vertical line, and here's my horizontal line, okay? And then you also need to connect these lines to each other. So after you draw the horizontal and the vertical line, you're gonna connect the points to make triangles all the way around your canvas. Okay, so it should look like that. And now we're going to add these other faces of our triangles, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So from the center, you can connect your corners with your ruler. So I'm going from one corner to the other corner with my ruler, and I'm gonna draw a small line here, a small line through the center, and a small line over here at the end. And I'm gonna do that going both directions. And then this is what it should look like now. So I've got some diagonal lines, but it does not go all the way through. So it's only in the center and then out at the corners. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna connect the points all the way out to this center point that we've connected already. So this is gonna go out there and out there. Same thing as this one. It's gonna go out there and up there, okay? So I'm gonna do that with my ruler. And do that on all four corners of your canvas. And then this is what you should have. So the shapes mimic the shapes on our reference photo. It does not have to be perfect. You just have to have all of your faces, because we're going to paint this as if it were three-dimensional using gradients, all right? Once you have this laid out, what I want you to do is I want you to think about what color you're going to use for your project. And in your sketchbook, go ahead and you also want to think about how you're going to darken that color. So last week we talked a lot about chromatic black and how chromatic black darkens colors different than using its complement to darken a color. So right here, I've printed out and taped a value scale for reference in my sketchbook. This is all above my reference picture for the canvas painting. And then what I've done is I've created a value scale below that reference picture with this color green, and it's not quite the same color because I did this the other day. Actually, here's my palette from that day. And then I've also, below that, created a blended gradient value scale. So it's using the same values, but I'm blending it using its complement to darken the color. And then now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna recreate this blended value scale, but these are both using the complement, and I really don't like how red it's gotten, so I'm actually gonna do it again, but I'm gonna use chromatic black, which I have mixed right here. So with the creating values, I just want to remind you that the rule is you want to paint the light color first. So I'm going to paint a gradient. I'm going to use this same green that I have used for all of these other ones. I'm just not going to use this on my project. I mixed a new green. So here's this same green. And what I'm doing is I'm only kind of mixing it on half of the value scale, because I'm going to use this, maybe a little bit more than half actually. I'm going to use this green as my base, and I'm going to mix the chromatic black into it. So the light color goes down first, and then the dark color gets brought in. And this is way too much paint on my brush. Do not use your mixing brush to paint with unless you clean it off. And by clean it off, I mean take it to the sink and wash it well. Do not just try to like scrape it off on the side. You do not need that much paint. This is an appropriate amount of paint to start painting with. And I'm gonna blend my chromatic black into this side, and I'm gonna kind of bring it in. I'm not gonna go all the way because I don't wanna lose that green, but I'm gonna go back and forth and create this nice gradient right there. So this is still the green, but over here I've got chromatic black, and I can bring in more chromatic black to really make sure that this end of the spectrum gets dark. And I'm just gonna continue to do that, but maybe not go as far as I did the last time. And again, bring in some more chromatic black. Go back and forth, make sure it's a nice, even gradient. And I kind of went too far right there, and I don't want it to take it that far. So I'm gonna come back in with my green and try to blend that out a little bit. Back and forth. I want it to be smooth, a smooth transition from dark to light. Then what I'm gonna do for the light side, or for the light spectrums, you wanna paint with just white to start, because white would be the light color. So I don't want to go ahead and paint green and try to blend my light color in. I'm gonna go ahead and paint white, and I'm gonna go right up to this green. And then I'm gonna take my green paint, and I'm gonna blend it out that way. Oops. Back and forth, so I make it a nice, smooth blended gradients. Now, I do not need to keep it as white as the paper. I know that our value scale kind of has a white paper, but it does not need to go that far in order to be a nice gradient. I do need some more green. I'm gonna work that this way. My lightest tone will still have a little bit of green in it. It's just not gonna be as white as the paper. Oops. Before I get too far, I'm gonna add a little bit more white down here at the end and just kind of feather it inward so I can have that nice smooth transition going back and forth. Into. Okay, so I really like the way the chromatic black looks opposed to using the complements. So now I'm going to start painting my canvas. So like I said, I have changed my green color. I'm now going to use this color green, not this color green. I mixed a new green and I needed a little bit more of it. That is fine. As long as it's similar, I think you'll be okay to change it as well. Just don't change it to like red or blue. You know, you want to keep it into the color that you've practiced in that family. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my reference photo and I'm going to think about where I'm going to paint these gradients. Every triangle has to have a gradient. It's going to fade. Even if it looks like it's all dark, you've got to decide which side is more dark and which side is not quite as dark. So I'm gonna start on this side because you can see this side of my canvas. You can't see over here so much. So if I'm looking at these three corners and I'm gonna start with this top shape, okay? So I'm looking at this shape and this shape up here. And if I reference my value scale, this is maybe a 7, maybe a 6. I'm gonna go with 7. And if it gradiates just slightly to a 6. So my 7 is gonna be on, this side, and it's gonna gradiate this way to a 6. So right here is the darkest, and it gets slightly lighter over to this right side. So because I'm on the dark side of the spectrum, I'm gonna paint with my color first. So here's my green. This project is all about controlling your brush. Again, you do not need a lot of paint. Quit trying to glob it on there and paint quickly, and go slow and layer it up. So I'm gonna paint my area. If you cannot get clean, crisp lines, you have too much paint. I'm gonna go along the side. So you can do lines kind of two ways. One way is like what I'm doing, where I'm just pulling the brush along the edge. Notice I run out of paint down here at the bottom, and that's fine, I keep going. I'm gonna turn it around and use the other side. The other way you can get nice crisp lines is by kind of pushing the paint up to that line, and I'm wiggling my brush and picking it up along that line, and then I can pull it backwards. Your goal is an even, clean area of color. So I'm gonna paint all of this, smooth out my space. And then while this paint is wet, I'm going to mix in my chromatic black. I do want a little bit more paint, I think. I don't like really seeing that white canvas through. So I might end up painting this with another layer actually. But for now, I'm gonna try to get it in one layer. All right, so there's my section. It's also kind of hard because I can't see up here, the iPad's in the way. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my chromatic black. Notice I'm using a different paintbrush because I want to keep this green on that brush, and I don't wanna wash my brush a billion times. But if you're switching colors, you should be washing your brush. So I'm gonna just dip a little bit. I don't have a lot, look at that. I can still see my paintbrush. And then this side is the darkest. So I'm going to go ahead and start there and build that shadow into my green with my chromatic black here. And I'm going along the edge. I still want nice crisp lines. So go slow. Then I'm gonna blend it outward. So as I blend, it's going to get more and more green as we get down here to this other side. And then I've got to kind of assess whether or not I reached my goal. My goal was a 7 and a 6. I think maybe I'm a 6 and a 5 right now. So I need more chromatic black. I need to blend it more. Go slow and build those values up. I'm also not pushing very hard with my paintbrush. Gentle touches, okay? I'm satisfied with that for now. I'm gonna come back to it later. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, I could paint this side or this side, but if I'm painting a section that's right next to another like wet section, it's gonna be really hard to keep your edges crisp, okay? So it's a better idea to just let that section dry and go paint a different section. In fact, it's a really good idea to find sections that have similar value tones and paint those next. So maybe I would skip over here and paint this one because I think they're almost identical in their values, but the 7 would be here and it would gradiate to a 6 up on this side. But I want to show you how to do something on the lighter end of the spectrum. So I'm actually going to paint this bigger section. So now I've got to decide, is it, what tone is it? What value is it? So I'm going to look up here and I'm thinking that I think that this is actually the middle tone on this side. So this side is slightly lighter than that. So I feel like this is really a 3 gradiating actually to a 1 on this side. So we've got 3, 2, and 1 in this section. So I'm all on the light side of the spectrum. So I'm gonna just paint with white to start. Everything is light. So, this has a little bit of green in it from when I did my gradient, which is fine because we're gonna add green to it, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm using a lot of white. I'm gonna paint the whole section. Even though I'm painting with white, it is still important for me to paint it evenly and watch my edges and make sure that I have nice crisp edge lines and nice even coats of paint. Oops. This is a bigger section, so I can be a little bit messier on the inside, but on the edges, ooh, that's too much paint. On the edges, I still want to be nice and crisp, nice and slow. I have way too much paint on my paintbrush. The more paint you have on your paintbrush, the harder it is to control your edges. There we go, that's a lot better. When I get to corners, I lift my brush up, so I'm painting with just the tips of the bristles. I really like these flat brushes. I think they work the best for this project. I think they work the best for like a lot of projects actually, but especially for this one. So again, I'm going to paint this corner and turn my brush up, so I'm painting on the tip rather than trying to fit a fat paintbrush into a skinny little area. Use just the tip of it. These brushes get really thin and draw really nice thin lines if you pick them up and just use the tip of the bristles. All right, so there's my white. And then, what did I say we were gonna do? 2 to 1, right? 3 to 1, I'm sorry. So 3's right here, and then 1's over here in this corner. So I already have some paint on my brush. So if this side is the darkest, I'm gonna go ahead and start pulling some of that color in to my whites. I do kind of need to work quickly because I don't want my white to dry before I have a chance to blend my color in there. And then I blend this all the way out to the other side. Remember, I'm gonna have to add layers, so it's okay that it is getting really light on this side. I'm gonna end up going back over it. So this corner over here is my lightest tone in my entire composition. So once I get that tone in there and it's nice and smooth and kind of gradiates out, I'm not gonna touch it again. In fact, I'm not gonna touch a lot of this over here again. I'm just gonna start adding a little bit of color kind of throughout here, and then I'm blending it in. All right, I have like, I don't know if you can see that, too much paint on my brush. So I'm gonna try to scrape it off on my palette. And then I'm gonna add some more of the darker green, of the green, not the darker green, this is my tone. So remember, this is a 1. I'm trying to make the middle more of a 2. And then I will add more to this other side for my 3. And 3 is slightly lighter than the original tone, original hue. So I feel like I've got a little bit of ways to go, little ways to go. I'm not even close yet. I still want to pay attention to that gradient and make sure that I'm not overdoing it. Sometimes, if I don't really want to add paint, I touch it with my finger. Just dab it, and it blends it nicely without adding any white or green. Just make sure you wash your hands and you don't add any more color somewhere else, like on your clothes. And I'm gonna add some more paint down here. And I'm knocking off a lot of this paint almost every time I go get more green because I'm getting a lot of the white on my brush and I'm trying to darken that white. I don't want to go too fast, but I also don't want to continue, you know, with that light color. So I'm essentially cleaning my brush before I add every layer. All right, maybe one more pass and then I will call it good. Right now I'm just kind of dabbing it into that corner so it blends without me having to brush back and forth. And then I can brush back and forth when I have a little bit more room. Okay. All right. Okay, so there is my gradient. And that's the light spectrum, that's the dark spectrum, and we got somewhere in between. This one's gonna be pretty much just green. So if I wash this off and kind of come back to my green brush, I don't know where it went, I've lost it. I think it was this one. Then I can start in this one, where this one's gonna be almost purely the color straight from the bucket with a little bit of white mixed in on this side. So like this color looks like is on this side of that one, whereas this one's just a shade darker. All right, so that is how you should paint your vector painting. Again, the point of this project is to control your brush. So you want nice, even paint marks or spaces. You want nice, crisp edges. Nice, crisp edges, nice, even paint areas, paint swatches. The good thing is, if you're painting, you know, sections next to dry sections. So if this was dry up here, which it's not, and I want to clean up the edges, all I do is I use the paint right over the top of it because acrylic paint covers what's beneath it. It's different than watercolor paint in that way. So I can clean up my edges slightly when I put my next section right next to it, okay? Do not rely on that. You want to make sure you're controlling your brush and attempting to make clean edges always. But then you can kind of go in and fix some things as you add some layers. So keep your reference picture out and consistent. You don't want this to rotate. You don't want your canvas to rotate. You want to make sure that they're all the same. All right? That's probably a little bit too dark, so I gotta go add some white to that. And then I will take a picture of this when I'm finished. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions.